Russia and Ukraine have entered a new phase of escalation in 2025. Ukraine has launched a counterattack in the Kursk region, warning that Russia is getting what it deserves. Moscow, on the other hand, has vowed a strong response to Kiev and its Western allies amid the use of ATACMS missiles. Our next report tells you how Ukraine's move has infuriated Moscow.
Ukraine's attack on Belgorod with US-made ATACMS missile is triggering a deadly threat from Moscow. Russia has warned that it will hit Ukrainian capital Kiev with hypersonic missiles. The US Lockheed Martin-made ATACMS, each costing $1.5 million, are fired from M142 High Mobility Artillery Rocket System, or HIMARS. Ukraine had used the 300-kilometer range missiles earlier on Russian-occupied territories, but now by using them on Russian soil, it has significantly escalated the conflict. Outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden allowed Ukraine to use the missiles last November after Russia began deploying North Korean troops in the war. Just days after Biden's approval, Russia responded by firing the Oreshnik missile in Ukraine's Dnipro region. Alongside firing the ATACMS, Ukraine also unleashed attacks on Leningrad and the Kursk region, claiming it caused significant Russian losses.
The commander-in-chief also reported on the situation in the Kursk region. The Russian army lost up to a battalion of North Korean infantry soldiers and Russian paratroopers. This is significant. I want to commend the professional and effective actions of our soldiers in the Special Operation Forces and the 80th Separate Air Assault Brigade.
Russia has retaliated, firing over 80 drones, including Iranian Shahids, at Ukraine. Kiev says it intercepted 34 drones in the attack that caused damage in Chernihiv and Sumy regions. Entering the third anniversary of the war, Russia is claiming significant gains in the east. It has taken control of Nadia village in the Luhansk region while putting Ukrainian troops under pressure in Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region. On the back foot, Ukrainian army's hopes are now resting on the U.S.
I think that Trump's common sense won't leave him, and the support will continue. We understand that Russian terrorist organization, this mammoth, has no right to exist in the shape it is now.
But the incoming Trump administration has left Ukraine with a lot of concerns. A swift end to the hostilities, it fears, could potentially come only with Russia being given its territories. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Dr. Glenn Diesen is a professor of international relations at the University of Southeastern Norway. He's now joining us live on this broadcast from Oslo, Norway. Dr. Diesen, good to see you and Happy New Year to you. Is it possible to understand what really President Volodymyr Zelensky wants? On one end, he's asking for a diplomatic way to end this war, but on the other, he's still provoking Moscow.
Yeah, no, I think, well, he still wants to continue a long war, and I think this has been quite clear because he keeps warning against a peace, which would be too rushed. So again, this is what the Americans were indeed pushing in the beginning of 2022 when they sabotaged the peace agreement in Istanbul. As Zelensky himself recognized back then, the Americans and other Western countries wanted a long war because they could drain Russia, with using and of course then destroying as well Ukraine. But now that it looks as if Ukraine has no more to give, it appears that there's more and more resistance in the West to continue this war, then especially with Trump. But I think what Zelensky wants is definitely to continue this war. And in regards to this ATACMS, it has to be pointed out that for more than 2.5 years, the US didn't attack with ATACMS because it was considered too dangerous of an escalation. Only after Trump won, the United States began to attack with these ATACMS missiles. And again, it hasn't been much of a secret either that this has been an effort to prevent Trump from ending the war by escalating things somewhat out of control before he takes over. So it's a very dangerous situation the next 2+ weeks that's left of the Biden administration.
Let's talk about those dangerous weeks that you speak of, Dr. Deason. What is the short-term effect or impact of this counterattack by Ukraine?
Well, it didn't have that much of a damage, it appears. According to Russia, all 8 ATACMS missiles against Belgorod were claimed to be intercepted. Now, but what makes this so dangerous is that Russia considers this to be a direct NATO attack on the Russian Federation. We keep referring them to simply supplying weapons. But again, as it's Americans who are operating these missiles. They're providing the targeting, the intelligence, and they're guided by American satellites. So from Russian perspective, they consider this to be an American attack. And this is why it's likely to create 2 very dangerous weeks coming ahead. And we see that this attack on Belgorod happens at the same time as there is a concentration of Ukrainian military forces close to Belgorod. So there might be a prelude to a new offensive into Russian territory, which would then also have American assistance behind it. So it's again, very dangerous times. We also see Ukraine launching this new massive offensive into Kursk, again, conquering Russian territory, intended to complicate the peace efforts of Trump. So I think, this is intended to make any negotiations more difficult for Trump. And it's a balancing effort as well, because all these escalations against Russia also threatens, of course, to trigger an excessive retaliation by the Russians, in which we might end up in a World War III.
And talking about Trump, will there be more pressure for Ukraine regardless of Trump taking charge?
Well, I think there's a growing pressure on Ukraine because they've run out of manpower. They're low on weaponry. The political support across the West is also dropping. Also, what in the Western media doesn't want to talk too much about is the fact that latest polling shows that only 16% of Ukrainians want to continue fighting. Even if you look at the polling across all of Ukraine, you can't find a single oblast anymore where you have a majority wanting to fight. So the discourse in Western capitals, which say, we have to support Ukraine, it's no longer coincides with reality, as most Ukrainians don't want to continue this war. And again, more and more Ukrainians, I believe, also see themselves as being used as a proxy by the West to go after the Russians. So I think it's a lot of pressure growing now on Ukraine, which is why they also appear to be folding to the American demands of reducing the recruitment age down to 18-year-olds, so they can begin to also get the Ukrainian teenagers into the trenches. So it's going to be very, I think, disruptive to last weeks. And again, a lot depends on how the Russians will respond to this attack as well. I wouldn't be surprised if we'd see Oreshnik missiles with warheads this time being used against Ukrainian territory, maybe even Kiev. I hear now some chatter in Russia about perhaps the need to remove Zelensky, given that he would resist all efforts of ending the war. So there could be some immense escalations on both sides before Trump takes power.
All right. Dr. Glenn Deason, as always, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to us today.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.